somebody might ask if this vibrating or acting on or with or for love, it brings out creativity, and it brings out new ideas. It brings out some might say evolution. Why did my teacher never talk about this in school? Why did my parents never talk about these things? Why is it not something that is a part of my educational life? I mean, I'm 24 now, and I went to school for almost 16, 18 years. I mean, whole life almost.
Well, that's a very interesting question, because that's the question I asked 21 years ago. When I had my own amazing experiences, and I realized clearly that there was a whole new explanation for reality that wasn't the religious story and in all their forms, and certainly wasn't the mainstream scientific story. An explanation that made sense of the world that these two don't make sense of at all. I asked that question: why the heck haven't I come across this before? And as I've obviously gone through the years experiencing and researching how the system works, the answer to the question became very clear, because the whole system of institutions in every country is designed not to enlighten people, not to tap into their true potential, but to turn them into software programs that have a perception of self and the world that is narrow enough for them not to see what's happening, but wide enough for them to have the intelligence to serve the system in various ways. They want us to be intelligent enough to serve the system of control, but not intelligent enough to realize it is a system of control. So if we think about it, you're sitting around a table and you're saying, you're manipulators, you're saying, how can we get children at the earliest possible age and have control of what they're told is reality through like 5 days a week at least, from when they're little kids right through to their teenage years, so that we'll turn out adults overwhelmingly that see themselves and the world in the way that suits our control system. And someone might say, well, I don't know whether they'll accept this, but I tell you the best way. What if we set up a system, I know, let's call them schools and universities, and what we'll do is we'll take the kids away from their families as early as we can. It's right, 4 or 5 would be perfect. And then we will program them through a system of so-called education until, you know, they're closing in on their 20s. And we will then, not in all cases, but in a vast majority of cases, we will get the software program at the end of that process that we set out to get. And then you ask the question about parents. Well, parents, of course, have been through the same system I've just described. So therefore, through no malevolence, they think they're telling their children what is right and wrong and how things are. Where I strongly would challenge these people, people called parents, is where they believe that because they have, say, a religious belief system or any kind of belief system, by definition they have the right to impose that upon their children, often with great pressure, because that is an arrogance beyond belief. You know, you brought this expression of infinite awareness into an experience in this reality, okay, thank you very much, but it's his experience, it's her experience, it's not yours. Oh, your mother wants you to work in a bank. Well, let me mother go and work in a bloody bank. And I'm not working in a bank, I'm going on a bike ride to India. Oh, where you go? Okay. I'm not asking you to go a bike ride to India, but just don't tell me to go and work in a bank. And this is where we have to, from the very earliest ages, is stand our ground, stand our uniqueness, and say, this is my uniqueness. I'm not asking it to be yours, but don't tell me that I'm going to live my life according to your blueprint. I'm not. Again, you find this peer pressure in schools. The earliest ages, it's like a genetic software program reaction, where even little children will target the one who's different. And I've experienced it. And it's almost like it's in the genetics, it's in the software, but consciousness can overwhelm it. And what we are seeing now, there's no doubt about it, as I travel now, I've been to 55 countries so far, there is a dramatic awakening of people to another version of self. Not the whole massive expansion, but it's teasing out in ways that 21 years ago, when I started on this journey, you wouldn't believe would ever have happened. Because I talk to a lot of people now, or I talk around the world. I couldn't fill a phone booth for a long time with this information. So there is an awakening going on. There's no doubt about it. But it's so important that no matter how young we are, or whatever our age is, or whatever, that we stand our ground. And by that I mean we stand our truth. And the more people that do that, the more we'll realize how many actually are very sympathetic to this perception of reality, but have never dared say so before because they fear what other people think. I'll tell a quick story. In the early days, when I wrote a book called Truth Vibrations, the first one I ever wrote about anything after I started to wake up, no one really wanted to know bookshops and stuff, because this was written by this man who's now been ridiculed. But I went to a bookshop in Oxford where the manager was very sympathetic, and he said to me, he said, I've just had a kind of a straw poll going around the staff. He says, and I reckon about 80% of the people who work, big bookshop, I reckon 80% of the people in this that work for this bookshop actually have sympathy with your view of how things are. He said, but none of them knew that 80% of them thought the same, because they were frightened of saying that this is what they believed in, because they feared the reaction of others. And as a result of that, this was locked into them. And if only some people had spoken their truth, then somebody, yeah, actually I agree with that. I thank God someone else is saying it. This is why it's so important. We do not concede to fear of what other people think. We do not concede to fear of what they will say about us or whatever. It doesn't matter, because they'll think something else tomorrow. People who now, to their credit, accept that years ago they ridiculed me and laughed at me. They're now reading my books, because if I'd have conceded to fear, I wouldn't have written the books. They wouldn't be reading them now. This is why. What is our truth? Okay, speak it, live it, and that's how we change things. Not by keeping our heads down, because that doesn't change anything.